Now let's take a little closer look at what we got from that import process. I've still got my video selected on the stage, and if we just look over to the property window, you can see that that's an instance of something called the FLVPlayback. And we can see by the icon over here, this is actually a component. So let's go take a look at the components that we have in Flash CS4. In the very first chapter, I set up our workspace and I added the component panel and the component inspector panel to the stack of visible panels. Now, if you don't have those at your fingertips, you can just go to the Windows pull-down menu and we'll find our component panel and our component inspector panel right here. So you can pull it up from either location. In the components panel, we see two groups of components. One is a user interface set that you might be using with some different data type applications. There you see common things like checkboxes, combo boxes, data grids, numeric steppers, text areas, those types of components, and you can use those ones, but what we're using right now is in the video category, and we're actually using the one right off the top, the FLVPlayback component. The rest of this panel shows bits and pieces of all the controls that are used inside the controllers that we chose, but the biggie is going to be that FLVPlayback. It's going to control all aspects of our video, including things like buffering and streaming playback for our users. Now, the second panel that we see here is called the Component Inspector. This panel is specifically used to modify component instances, like our FLVPlayback component. Let me open up that panel. And if you've got your FLVPlayback component selected, you'll see a whole bunch of different settings that we can use to change the behavior of that component. Now, just to satisfy some curiosity, click on something else. I'll just click over here on the Home button, and I'll go back over to that Component Inspector panel. It should show you that it's only available to components. So we're only going to be able to change component instances in this case. I'll click back on my FLVPlayback component. Now, as we look through here, we can see all kinds of different things that we can use to change the behavior. For instance, there's an autoplay behavior. Now, I'm going to scroll this over so we can see it a little bit more, and I might even make my panel just a little bit wider so we can read a few of these settings. You can see that the autoplay is set to true, and when we tested our movie, as soon as we went into the exhibitions area, the video started playing back. If you set this to false, just by pulling down the menu, you could make it so that the user would actually have to click the play button each time to start the video. We can also do some interesting things here. For instance, there's a skin auto hide feature, which is defaulted to false, but when we set it to true, it'll actually hide the controller skin when the user's not playing back. Let's try out that small change. I'll click away from my panel, and we'll test our movie again. To see the video, I'm just going to click on the Exhibitions button. You can see our video comes up, but the controller's only there when my cursor's over the video. If I move my cursor off the video, it gets out of the way, and then we can see what's going on. So it's basically only there when my user needs it. Let me close that test movie window up. If we reselect our FLVPlayback component and go back over to the Component Inspector, I'd like to show you the two most important settings in here. They're actually the ones that were set up by our video import wizard. If you look down here at Source, we can choose the source as Morris Dancers F4V. Now, if we click this bar at the end, we can actually browse to a different movie. And that's how we would change which video shows in our playback. We can also see the skin here. And if I once again click on the magnifying glass, we're back at the same selection panel that we used to pick our skin in the first place. I'll just make a quick change for color. I think white would look a lot better here, with a little transparency to it. So I'm going to select white from the color palette. I'll go back to alpha, and I'll drop it down a little bit more, maybe 60% on white. We'll click OK, and when we click away from our component inspector and test our movie, we'll see our changes. We'll click Exhibitions, and this time, when I roll over it, you can see that my controller's changed to white. We'll close that test window up once more. If we go up to our library panel, we'll see actually that an FLVPlayback component has been added to the library of our FLAW file. And that's how it gets included in the SWF. If you needed another one in your movie, you could just pull one right out of the library, or you could go back to the component panel Either way, you're just going to drag one out and start to use it. In fact, what we'll find out very quickly once we know a little bit more about this FLV playback component is that we don't really need to use the wizard at all. Let's try something out real quick. I'm just going to take the movie that we've created and I'm just going to delete it from the timeline completely. I've already got it selected. I'll just hit the delete key and that will remove it from the keyframe just like any other graphic object in the program. Now I can go back to my component panel, go to the FLV playback component, select it, and just drag another copy right out onto the stage. It'll be dropped wherever my cursor is located, in the same keyframe we had before in the exhibitions content layer, which is active. And let's take a look at it in the component inspector. Now I've already got it selected, so I'll just go over to my component inspector, and you can see that the source is blank. The skin is already set up, and just like a lot of other tools in Flash, it's going to stick with whatever we used last, but we can still change it. I'll go down to the source though, we'll click in that area, I can go to the magnifying glass, and just use the browse key over here on the end. We'll go and find our F4V file. Remember, we have to have that set up before we can play our movie inside of the Flash application. I'll select it and click Open. We'll click OK and leave Match Source Dimensions on. And it's just going to bring my video in just like before when we used the wizard. I'll click away from this panel, and it looks like it needs a little redraw, but if we test our movie, we should see that our video is set up just like before. I'll hit Command Return or Control Enter on the PC. Here comes my movie, and under the Exhibitions area, there we've got our video. So you see, it's not really hard at all once you know about the FLV playback component. Let's close up our test window.